I'm Rhea Calloway. And this is how humiliation smells like Merlot and regret. Red wine slid down my face, soaking through the silk of my blouse while the young blonde across from me screamed that her husband owned this restaurant and she could throw out anyone she wanted. 50 people watched like they'd paid admission, forks frozen halfway to their mouths, waiting to see if I'd shatter. I didn't. I wiped my cheek with the corner of a napkin, looked at her once, and said quietly, "I hope that made you feel better." She blinked, speechless for the first time all evening, and the silence hit harder than the wine ever could. I stood, smoothed my jacket, turned to the man beside me, and apologized to him for the disruption as if she hadn't just detonated her insecurities in public. "Mr. Juan Delgado," I said, steady and calm. "I'm sorry about this. I didn't expect dinner to come with theater." He reached for his wallet. Voice low, "You didn't deserve that. I'll cover the check and your dry cleaning." I almost laughed but didn't. Outside, the Texas air felt thick with heat and irony. Warren Delgado followed me onto the sidewalk, his voice careful. The way people talk to someone they think might break. "You handled that better than most men I know," he said. I smiled, faintly, because breaking would have been too easy. He hesitated, then added, "Call me Monday. I think you're the kind of person I can work with." His business card was crisp, white, and expensive, like the world I used to belong to. I watched the light from the Blue Orchid's windows spill onto the pavement, heard laughter behind the glass, and wondered if anyone inside knew that I had built every inch of it. I designed the amber light fixtures, the curved bar, the logo embossed on every menu. She might have married the chef, but I made the restaurant. And as I stood there, dripping wine, all I could think was that Merlot stains, but so does memory. 2 days after the wine incident, I met Warren Delgado again at a quiet cafe near South Congress. He looked nothing like the man who had watched chaos unfold across the table. Now he seemed deliberate, almost curious. "You know," he said, stirring his coffee. "My sister went through something just like that. Married a man who hid his profits and left her with debt." I listened because pity wasn't in his voice, only recognition. And then he added, "She found a note she'd signed 10 years earlier. That note changed everything. 2. He slid a business card across the table with a practiced motion. The kind men in control use when they want you to notice the weight of paper. "Mariana Porter," he said. "Family finance law. Austin. My sister swears by her." I turned the card over and over between my fingers and told him I wasn't sure I wanted to reopen old wounds. He smiled faintly, not unkindly. "Old wounds don't close if infection's still inside," he said. And somehow it didn't sound like advice, but a statement of fact. The card stayed in my hand long after he left. I sat there until my coffee went cold, watching people pass by, ordinary and unscarred, wondering when exactly my life had become a cautionary tale whispered over brunch. The Blue Orchid still dominated the city's food pages. Colin still posed for photos with Alyssa, and I was still the ghost who built their kingdom. I told myself justice was expensive and closure didn't pay rent. But I also knew I'd spent too long pretending that silence was grace. That night I pulled out the old metal box where I kept tax receipts and bank statements. The smell of dust and ink hit me the way certain songs drag you backward through time. I remembered my grandmother's handwriting on every label, her obsession with copies, her quiet mantra that paper never lies. Somewhere in those stacks, there might be proof that I hadn't been naive, just betrayed. I traced the edge of Marianne Porter's card and whispered to no one in particular, "If there's something buried in here, I'm going to find it." The city hummed outside my window, unaware that a storm had just shifted direction. Marianne Porter looked exactly how I imagined someone who wins for a living would look: composed, direct, and allergic to small talk. She didn't waste time asking how I was. She simply said, "Tell me everything. Don't make me pull it out of you." I told her about Colin, about how I believed in him, about the inheritance that became his restaurant, about the affair that ended everything. She listened with a pen poised midair, only moving to ask, "How exactly did the money move from you to him?" I said it was a direct transfer from my inheritance account. $90,000 in total, sent to fund the opening of the Blue Orchid. Her eyes flicked up for the first time. "And you didn't keep any paperwork?" I hesitated, explaining that my grandmother made us sign something before she agreed to release the funds. "Some kind of note," I said. "A formality," she insisted on. "I haven't seen it in years." Marianne leaned back, expression unreadable, and said, "That's not a formality. That's a contract. If it still exists, it could be your key." Her voice was so steady it felt like a verdict. I told her I wasn't sure I could find it, that I'd moved twice since then and probably lost half my life in the process. She replied, "Paper doesn't vanish unless someone wants it to. Find it. That's your weapon." When I asked what would happen if it was gone, she didn't soften, then find proof that it once existed. Emails, witnesses, drafts, anything that shows it was real. Because paper remembers what people forget. I nodded slowly, the weight of her words heavier than anything I'd carried from that marriage. She added quietly, "And if we prove it, the court can reopen your divorce settlement on grounds of fraud." Her certainty scared me more than Colin ever had. I asked what that would mean for him, and she said, "If he hid assets, it's perjury. If he forged or omitted income, it's financial fraud. Either way, it's actionable." She asked one last question before standing. "Are you ready for this to get ugly?" I told her it already was. She smiled, faint but real. "Good. Then you'll survive it." I walked out of her office gripping the card she'd given me, the same way I'd held Warren's days earlier. And for the first time since that glass of wine hit my face, I felt the tremor of something that almost resembled power. I spent the entire weekend surrounded by cardboard boxes that smelled like dust and time. The kind of air that clings to things you should have thrown away but didn't. I opened every folder labeled taxes, receipts, miscellaneous, chasing a memory that barely existed. My grandmother's voice echoing somewhere between them, telling me that nothing was ever too small to document. Every hour made the search feel more like an excavation of who I used to be. The version of me that believed love could be trusted without proof. The apartment turned into a paper battlefield. And just when I started to believe the note was gone, my hand brushed against an envelope tucked behind an old recipe book. The paper inside was thin and yellowed at the edges, but the ink was steady, as if time itself had respected it. At the top it read, "Promissory Agreement," dated nearly 10 years earlier. The words were careful and cold, written in legal phrasing I'd once been too young to understand. Halfway down, one line pulled the air from my chest. "In consideration for this investment, investor shall hold 40% equity stake in the business upon establishment." I sat on the floor staring at our signatures, mine and Colin's, next to a notary stamp I hadn't noticed the day I signed it. The realization arrived in silence. My grandmother hadn't trusted him, but she'd trusted me enough to protect myself even when I didn't know how. I whispered to the empty room, "You brilliant woman," as if she could hear me through the years. By the time I folded the note back into its envelope, the weight of it felt different, heavier than paper, lighter than anger. I placed it on the table beside Marianne's business card and realized that what I held wasn't nostalgia. It was evidence. My grandmother had left me a weapon disguised as love, and I was finally old enough to use it. Marianne read the document twice before speaking. Each line reflected in her glasses like a verdict being written. "This changes everything," she said finally. "He acknowledged your investment and promised you 40% ownership. He took that money and claimed full control. That's fraud." Rhea. I told her that Colin had reported the restaurant barely made $2,000 a year, that the judge had accepted those numbers without question. She nodded slowly, tapping her pen once. Then he lied under oath. And if he lied to the court, he probably lied to the IRS too. I asked what we could actually do with a piece of paper that had been hiding in a recipe box for a decade. She said, "We reopened the divorce case on grounds of newly discovered evidence and fraudulent concealment. Once the court grants discovery, we'll see his real books. If he underreported profit. It's more than theft, it's a federal problem." I didn't flinch. "Then let's do it." Mariana smiled. Not warmly, but with recognition, and said, "Good. I'll bring in a forensic accountant. His name's Victor Dane. He's precise and patient, the kind of man who can make numbers talk." I told her I wanted every word of it documented. Every lie pinned down like a specimen. When Victor arrived 2 days later, he spoke in the calm tone of someone who had already seen too many cover-ups. "We'll need 5 years of bank statements, supplier invoices, payroll records," he said. "If there's a second ledger, we'll find it." Marianne told him to proceed, then turned to me. "You'll need to authorize access to the original divorce filings and financial disclosures. The court must see that you couldn't have known about this document before." I signed. "My name's steady for the first time in months," she said. "Once the petition is filed, he'll know. Be ready for noise." I asked what kind of noise, and she replied, "He'll offer a settlement first. That's how guilt sounds when it's afraid of sunlight." I said I wouldn't take it, and she met my gaze. "You will if it's smart. You won't if it's cheap. We'll know soon enough." I left her office with the copy of the promissory note folded in my bag, its corners pressing against the fabric like proof that something solid was finally on my side. 3 days after Marianne filed the petition to reopen the divorce case, I received the first of many calls. "We have a proposal for you," Colin's lawyer said, his voice smooth but carrying a weight I hadn't expected. "My client believes this matter could be settled quietly, with a sum of $30,000. No further action. No court dates." I almost laughed. "Tell him to keep it." He paused, as if uncertain whether I was joking. "That's your decision?" he asked. "Yes. It's not enough." Marianne was on the phone with me minutes later. "The fact that he offered you money means he's worried. But that amount? It's a joke. He's trying to buy silence. We're going for more." She didn't need to explain further. This wasn't about money anymore, it was about exposure. "We've got the IRS looking at him," she continued. "And now we have the evidence we need to prove his fraud. This isn't over." Too. I sat back in my chair, the cold weight of her words sinking in. It wasn't the money that mattered, it was the principle. The idea of Colin, the man who'd once vowed to build a life with me, now scrambling to cover his tracks, made the decision easier. He wasn't just lying to me, he was lying to the court, to the IRS, to everyone. The settlement offer, a quick fix to his mess, was a small, pathetic bribe that wouldn't touch the real damage. I thought about the years of work I had put into that restaurant, my name never mentioned, and I knew this was about making him face the truth. When the phone rang again, this time it was Victor. "The forensic accounting report came through," he said. "The numbers don't add up. Colin underreported the restaurant's income by over $100,000 a year for 4 years. He didn't need to say anything else. That was the moment the game changed. When the man who thought he could bury the truth had his world start to unravel, and this time, the silence wouldn't protect him. Victor's findings had confirmed what I'd known all along. Colin hadn't just taken money from me. He'd been stealing from everyone. The settlement offer was nothing but a desperate attempt to avoid the inevitable. I wasn't just going to win, I was going to make sure everyone knew exactly how far he'd gone to cover up his lies. 2 weeks later, I met Laura Jennings at a coffee shop on the edge of the city. She looked exactly how I expected, a little worn, a little nervous, but steady. "I don't want to be part of anyone's revenge," she said, glancing over her shoulder as if someone might be listening. But what I saw, I can't pretend it didn't happen. I nodded. "What did you see?" "Laura?" She took a breath, gathering herself. "I worked there for 5 years. Rhea, I saw the double ledger. The cash payments. The way Colin made sure certain things stayed off the books. I wasn't blind. Town." She explained how, one night, she'd found a notebook in Colin's office, an unofficial ledger, listing all the cash transactions that never hit the register. "I brought it up to him once," she said. "Asked if everything was being reported right. He told me to keep my nose out of it." I could feel the weight of those words. The betrayal wasn't just mine, it was everyone's. From the staff to the customers who unknowingly paid inflated prices. "And when you raised concerns?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "I was fired," she replied flatly. Just like that. No warning. No explanation. Just told to pack up and go. "Oh." Her voice wavered for a moment. "I was loyal. I spent years building that place. And he tossed me aside like I didn't matter." She looked down, hands gripping her coffee cup. I didn't even get a goodbye. I stared at her. The frustration I had felt for years suddenly shared between us. "Lauda, if you're willing to testify, we can make this right. Not just for me, but for everyone he's hurt." She met my gaze and nodded slowly. "I'll do it. I'll tell them everything. I called Marianne that evening. My voice steady for the first time in weeks. We've got her. Laura's on board." Marianne didn't hesitate. "Good. We're moving forward. This will change everything." I didn't say anything. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the winning side of this fight. Laura wasn't just a witness, she was the confirmation we needed. And now, we could bring Colin's lies into the light. The phone call came on a Monday afternoon, just as I was starting to review the blueprints for my next project. Colin's lawyer had a new proposal for me. "My client is prepared to offer $30,000 to settle this matter privately," he said. His tone firm but a little uncertain. "We don't need to go through with the investigation. This can all go away." I didn't hesitate. "Tell Colin to keep it," I said. "He's not buying my silence with his crumbs." Marianne was already expecting this. "Of course," he offered, she said, her voice steady. "He's panicking. But that amount? It's a joke. He thinks this will go away if he throws some cash your way. It's not enough." I leaned back in my chair. "It's not about the money anymore." "Is it?" I asked. She didn't respond right away. But the silence between us was all the answer I needed. "No, it's not," she finally said. "This is about making him face what he's done. Not just to you, but to everyone he's ever manipulated." "Don't." I sat in the stillness of my office, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Colin wasn't just trying to cover up his lies, he was trying to bury them. And if I took the money, I would be part of the lie. "Decline the offer," I said. "We're going all in. Let's expose him." I heard her smile through the phone. I'll make sure it's done right. Wanted. The next few days felt like a blur of paperwork, meetings, and phone calls. But the momentum had shifted. The case wasn't just about getting my money back. It was about taking back control of my own narrative. The next move was on us. And this time, we weren't backing down. As the papers were filed, I could feel the storm gathering. Colin was about to face the consequences of his actions, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The courtroom was quieter than I expected, the air thick with the weight of unspoken judgments. Colin sat across from me, his face a mask of forced calm, while his attorney whispered in his ear. I could feel the tension coiling inside me, but I didn't let it show. Mariana, standing beside me, didn't flinch. She was ready for this moment. And so was I. The judge called the case, and everything else fell away as the proceedings began. Colin's lawyer stood up first, presenting his case with practiced ease. Your Honor, we are here today to address the petition to reopen the divorce settlement on grounds of newly discovered evidence and fraud. My client maintains that no such fraud occurred. His voice was smooth, his words carefully chosen to sound reasonable, but I could see through it. His calm demeanor was just a cover for the panic I knew he was hiding behind those rehearsed lines. Marianne stood when it was our turn. Your Honor, she said, her voice clear and unwavering. We are not here to rehash old wounds. We are here to expose fraud. My client, Rhea Calloway, discovered documentation that proves her ex-husband, Colin Mercer, intentionally underreported the income of his business during their divorce proceedings. She handed over the promissory note, the one that had started all of this. This document shows that my client was promised 40% ownership in the business. Colin Mercer never disclosed this during the divorce, and his actions were both deceitful and illegal. 2. Colin's lawyer jumped to his feet. This is nothing more than an attempt to drag my client through the mud. These claims are baseless. The words hung in the air. But they didn't have the same weight as Marianne's calm response. Baseless? Marianne raised an eyebrow. Your client failed to disclose assets, intentionally undervalued his business, and used that lie to undercut my client in a legal proceeding. That's not baseless. Mr. Shaw, that's fraud. I could feel Colin's eyes on me, but I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The evidence was on the table, and for the first time in this entire battle, I felt a sense of power I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Colin wasn't going to walk away from this unscathed. I wasn't going to let him. The judge glanced at the papers and then at Colin, his expression unreadable. This is a serious accusation, he said, his voice low. Mr. Now, Mercer, you'll need to respond to this evidence. Colin's face turned pale, the color draining from his skin. He looked like a man realizing for the first time that the ground beneath him was no longer solid. 6 months after the settlement, I sat in my small office, staring at the stack of checks on my desk. The final one was a lump sum, covering the back profits Colin had never paid me. A total of 265,000, including the damages and legal fees. Marianne had called the case closed. But even as I signed the deposit slip, the weight of it felt lighter than I expected. I'd gotten what I was owed. But it wasn't about the money anymore. The phone rang. It was Marianne. It's done, she said. The IRS wrapped up their investigation. Colin's paying fines, penalties, and taxes he should have been paying all along. No prison, but his reputation is officially gone. I sat back in my chair, letting the silence settle around me. He'll never be the same. Will he? I asked, almost to myself. Marianne's voice was steady. No, but he'll never come after you again. Either. You took back everything he tried to steal. Dote. It wasn't victory that I felt, though. It was relief. Pure and simple. I had finally closed the door on that chapter of my life. The blue orchid was sold. Its glory, a memory now. But the price had been steep. I had lost more than I could have ever imagined when I signed that first check. But I had gained something. Too, the ability to walk away without looking back. A few months later, I received a small envelope in the mail. It was from Laura. Inside, there was a thank you card, scribbled in a hurried hand, and a bottle of wine. The card read, "I finally took that trip to Italy. Just like you promised, I placed it on my shelf. A reminder that not all things lost are gone forever." I poured myself a glass of the wine that night and thought about the woman I used to be. The one who had been so desperate to hold on to everything, only to realize that true freedom came from letting go. The phone rang again. This time, it was Raymond Talbot, calling to congratulate me on my latest design project. "Ria," he said, "you've been through hell, but I've never seen someone come out stronger. I've got another project for you. A new restaurant. Same city. It's yours if you want it." I smiled. "Send me the details. I think I'm ready for something new." As I hung up the phone, I realized that the best revenge wasn't just surviving, it was building something better. Something of my own. Thank you for watching. If you've ever felt overlooked or betrayed, you know the journey to reclaim your life can be a long one, but it's always worth it. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment below and let me know where you're watching from.